Boy, it feels good to be back. As I said off camera, Harry, 1 week felt like 1 month. And we're back in the hot seat again. It's great to be back. I am here with the under 76 kg Essex Open champion, Harry Powell. That's why he's getting all that info from you. The king himself is on the mats, taking home gold medals. Nobody is safe in the London Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu scene. Make that be known right here and right now, Harry. Tremendous moment for you. Back after a 5-year layoff, winning medals on the podium again.
That's true. We managed to get out. Yeah, fucking 5 years is a long time. Yeah, I put on my Instagram a photo, and Ian and I have been talking back and forth for a long time, and I'll say it publicly now that you were a great help in sort of not necessarily giving me the confidence, but giving me a sounding board to sort of air my thoughts out, air my decision-making process out on sort of going back to competition and all that stuff. I had a nice run, had 2 matches against the same fella. Both of our divisions fell apart, and so we were matched together. And yeah, I was able to bring home the wins. Certainly, very Georges St. Pierre. I was not impressed with my own performance. But look, I think, it was more important to just get out there and do it and feel those nerves, feel that energy again, feel the intensity, and start to build a platform for myself where I can then take that on into further competitions. And the weekend wasn't even about winning necessarily. It was lovely to win. Obviously, that's you never go into one of these things to lose. But the real goal was to just get back on the mats, and we got back on the mats. So in future, there will be there'll be performance related ideas and all that sort of stuff. But at least for the rest of 2024, the aim will just be get on the mats, feel the intensity, and just see what happens.
Indeed, breaking down barriers, man. You should be proud of yourself as well, because you moved up in weight too. You jumped up a weight class, fought a bigger guy, took home the win as well. So yeah, hopefully that leads to even greater success in the next tournament. Fuck weight cut. That's it. That's how much this man doesn't want to weight cut. He fights up a fucking division. So how'd you like them apples? Speaking of champions, Alexandra Pantoja took on Steve Erceg at the UFC 301 main event in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro. That's what we're going to break down on the balance breakdown, this entire card, which took place last Saturday. A very, very good card. Look at what one that had the name value that we had for 300, which is like totally fine. But I was expecting this card to deliver, Harry, and I think it did deliver overall, to be honest. A fantastic main event, the return of Jose Aldo, and lots of other success for Brazilian fighters on the card as well. I'm sure you were just as hyped for the fight card as well, watching it back. I thought it was really good overall.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I mean, as I sort of wrote in the opening paragraph of the Spotlight this week, that the show was sort of billed as Brazil versus the world, right? 13 fights, all 13 had Brazilian fighters on them. Obviously, William Gomes fell out fight week. These things happen in MMA. Fuck weight cutting one more time. But as we got closer to fight week, it just felt like Jose Aldo show. It really felt like the Jose Aldo show. And I was so happy to see him go out and look just brilliant against a very, very, very good fighter in the division. Pantoja and Erceg was probably fight of the year so far for me. And then we had a litany of fights further down the card that delivered in sort of shock value in Anthony Smith. Caio Borralho manufactured a win somehow. And then, again, we had performances that looked great. I thought Ishmael Bonfim looked really, really good. Vince Pichel was decent in that fight too. I was happy with Alessandro Costa's performance. Just all up and down the card, there were some really, really, really good performances. And I was damn wrong about Yasmin Lucindo as well. I was very, very impressed with her performance. Yeah, I thought it was a great card. Really, really, really good card. And, Spencer's written an article this week about 301 and the people that were sort of detracting away from 301 is nowhere near as good as 300 and this and that and the next thing. And you and I have talked about this ad nauseum, and obviously you've just mentioned it here. There is a priority rating to these cards, and even by the UFC standard, UFC 300 is an enigma. It's always going to be an enigma. UFC 400 will be an enigma. UFC 500 will be an enigma, and we will go on and go on and go on and go on and go on. And so it's just ridiculous to think that these cards are going to be able to continue as planned at UFC 300. It just doesn't exist. And I was very, very, very happy with the output of 301. Sorry.
Great card. Absolutely. So was I. Let's talk about the main event, Pantoja versus Erceg. How great this fight was and how close this fight was absolutely no surprise to me, to be honest. I knew there was avenues that Erceg could go down to get the win. A couple of mistakes along the way probably cost him in the long run, but we're talking about a 28-year-old man that was fighting in his 4th UFC fight. And a guy that we're definitely, I would almost say, I know there's no definites in MMA, I guess, but a guy I'd be very, very confident in saying that I think we're going to see him in a title shot again down the line. Pantoja, on the other hand, went out there and defended his crown as he likes to do. It was a grindy, gritty, pulling it out of the water at the end, to be honest. I mean, all was on the line. I mean, we can talk scorecards maybe after the fight, but that was a damn close fight. I had a dead even going into round 5, and he just always seems to find a way. It was a typical kind of a game plan that you see Pantoja. We didn't see all that much that what we would have seen in the past from him. I was surprised with his success levels on the feet, to be honest. I thought he was very, very good and hurt Erceg and caused him some problems and more problems than I thought he would on the feet. But at the end of the day, Harry, it was what you and Spencer were saying, and shout out to Spencer for coming in last week to preview this card. It was the grappling exchanges. It was the pressure of that grappling and the takedowns at the correct moments, and let alone the takedowns. It was the damage that was caused when he did take the fight down as well. You accumulate all those things together, and you can't argue too much with the end scorecards, really. A 48-47, 48-47, 49-46, a little bit of a stretch, but for me, but I would agree with that 48-47 Pantoja scorecard, and it kind of tells the story of how damn close this fight was, Harry, in reality.
Yeah, so I think from a scoring perspective, I would agree with you, 3-2 Pantoja, and I think it really came down to Erceg having, I don't think it was a bad fight IQ. Now, this isn't me necessarily making excuses for him either. I just think his ego and the moment kind of got on top of him a little and allowed, in that 5th round is what I'm talking about, right? He comes out in the 5th round and Pantoja is tired, right? He is tired, and Erceg gets to him and they have a bit of exchange, and Erceg lands a takedown. Shoots for a takedown, lands a takedown. Immediately, he does not do a good job of controlling the hips of Pantoja, who then wrestles back up and takes Erceg back down. And you could tell when Erceg was on his back there in the center of the cage, he took a deep sigh, and it was fuck, I'm tired now. I shouldn't have made that decision. And the amount of energy that it took him to get back to his feet, get out of the back body lock, defend his back as Pantoja was pulling him on top of his own hips is incredible. It's an incredible amount of energy. And I do feel like if he doesn't pull him on top of him, Pantoja's still tired. There's no rest time there for Pantoja. And it is very likely that we see a different scorecard, because in the 4th, Pantoja was tiring and Erceg looks great in that 4th round. And, we know that Pantoja starts every round like a bat out of hell. And then if he's not gaining the momentum that he wants, he will slow down. And I think when Erceg looks back at this fight, he will be kicking himself for that specific decision in the 5th. But when we're talking about one decision changing a 25-minute fight's outcome,
we're talking about championship level fights, man. That's all it takes sometimes. It's just that one little error, and it could change so much in your life. And he'll look back at that, but he does have the time, like I said, to kind of bounce back, learn from those mistakes, and get himself back up into the helm. Did anything surprise you at all with the matchup?
Not really.
Yeah. Not really for me either. Not really for me at all.
I wasn't shocked at how well Pantoja did on the feet, because I just think the style is really, really difficult to deal with. When he's out of range, he's throwing those really long, big, really reachy shots that if you try and close the distance on him, he's got really good grappling. If that's what it comes to. If not in the clinch game, his knees were ferocious in the clinch on Saturday night. Absolutely ferocious with those knees up the middle. And there is an element where he can be so reckless in those longer ranges because his clinch game, because his grappling, because his scramble ability is so strong. And Erceg he was making some wonderful reads and some wonderful adjustments as we moved through the fight. But you can't replicate that style too well. Like, that's very, very tough. And so you have to work it out in that cage. And I was very impressed with Erceg's ability to do that. But when you're fighting a madman and you're used to fighting fundamentally crisp boxing, MMA boxing, obviously, but crisp fundamental MMA boxing, and then you come up with a madman, you're like, well, this shit doesn't work. It doesn't work as well, right? He's not making the reactions that I wanted to make, and now I'm going to have to figure this out on the fly. And we saw as the rounds moved on, specifically in that fourth round, Erceg was like, oh, I've got this now. I understand what's going on. It's fine. Yeah. I know what's coming. I know what my reactions are. I know what my timing is. It was the inability to stay on his feet for long periods of time. It was the inability to progress through those grappling exchanges. And it's just interesting.
And lack of confidence in those positions as well. I mean, when we're talking about and lack of confidence, I believe that was brought on by Pantoja and that style, that particular style. When you got a style like Pantoja, you know, looking back at Pantoja versus Figueiredo, there was two things that Figueiredo did very, very well, and that was he punished Pantoja for rushing in. He punished him with uppercuts and elbows, and Erceg tried to do that in the fight, but he just wasn't active enough on the feet and just didn't do it enough. Now, that is because he has the takedown in the back of his mind, so we have to give Pantoja the credit for putting that thought process in the head of Erceg. But I really think if he had have been a little bit more active in certain stages of the fight, and it's easy for us to say, of course, I think, you know, he would have got the job done as well. But, you know, the elbows and the uppercuts, they were landing. Like you said, Pantoja, what he did so well is that he lunged in with the initial attack, and whether it was successful or not, he countered that with the clinch, with those knees down the middle. So it's obviously something that Pantoja is wary of in his game, and maybe a flaw in his game, because, you know, when you are rushing in, you're obviously nearly doubling your chances of getting clipped on the way in and getting knocked out. But Pantoja is just so incredibly tough. Like, the toughness and the durability of him is next to none. But, you know, he got cut bad with the elbows on the inside. You know, listening to the lads on the big podcast as well, I agree completely. When they said it wasn't, you know, maybe that visual, or it didn't look as bad. And I agree, because when he caught Pantoja, I believe it was in the second round with that inside elbow, when Pantoja went back to the corner and you seen the cutman wipe Erceg's forehead, he wiped it and there was nothing there. And I thought, oh, is this in his hairline? But then, you know, he moved it around and I could see it opening up ever so slightly. And I was like, fuck me, that's a clean cut and very hard to see. I was full sure it was in the hairline. But with all those things that were mentioned, Harry, you know, who do we give credit to most in that main event? For Pantoja for battling through it tough? Because I think we can't get blinded by the ranking here. We have to look at the skill set of both of these gentlemen, and they're very, very closely matched. And Erceg, you know, in losing, probably deserves to move up the rankings a little bit, strangely enough, with the level of skill. And I just think it was lack of elite level experience, elite level experience. So I think, you know, you can get your UFC experience, but then you got, you know, why we move up the rankings is we get that top 10 experience, we get that top 5 experience. But, you know, unfortunately for Pantoja, he got that top 10 experience and he jumped straight to the championship experience. So, you know, those 1 or 2 fights in between that maybe a normal contender might have had kind of, you know, would pay dividends to somebody like Erceg. But that 25 minutes, the success that he had against Pantoja, that's going to give him the height of confidence. And like, I'm buzzing to see what he's going to look like in his next fight. And I would not like to be his opponent, if I'm being completely honest. But maybe your overall assessment on the fight itself before we wrap it up and move to the co-main event.
So Lots of questions to answer there. Who takes credit? I think it's both fighters in equal measure. Pantoja once again showed, and look, at the end of the day, when you're a champion, you have to find a way to fucking win, right? You
That's
have
being
to
a
find a way.
champion.
And he found a way, right? He found a way. And did he find a way with a little bit of luck from Erceg? Maybe, but he still found a way, right? Because when he got taken down, it could have been that he said, oh, fuck, he's got me. That was a beautiful double leg. I'm just going to try and ride this out and I'll get up when I get up. And no, he immediately reversed the position, immediately wrestled back up, immediately put Erceg on his back. That's a champion. For Erceg, I think you hit the nail on the head with the experience point. I said to Spencer before, and I'll happy to say it here publicly, I don't just think Steve Erceg will fight for a title again. I think he will win one. I think the
Me
toughest
too.
match in the division for Steve Erceg is Mohamed Bakayev.
Yeah.
And I think it's Mohamed Bakayev because he's long and he can do a little bit of striking, but it's the fundamental kind of striking. And then he can do all of the grappling. And
But I'm unsure about Mahayev. But no, we can talk about next or what's next. But I'm unsure about Mahayev in the championship rounds or even at the end of the third round, where what Erceg proved in this is that he does have the gas tank to go 25 minutes, and now he knows that as well.
Not just 25 minutes either. 25 minutes was one of the craziest cardio machines that division can show you. One of the craziest output machines that division can show you. Now, we have to question, what did that fight take from Steve Erceg, right? What did that take from him? I don't know. He's still quite young in his MMA career, still quite young in his physical career, in his physical person, sorry. But just as my overarching opinion on the fight, I thought that we got to see that Steve Erceg is absolutely at the elite level. We got to see that Pantoja can come through the grit and the fire once again, because there's a limit to that, right? There's absolutely a limit to that. There will be one day when Pantoja cannot come through that fire and that grit and that desire in the same way. His body will start to fail him in ways his mind doesn't fail him. And it's fortunate for him that Steve Erceg was not able to capitalize on Saturday night. But if you do a rematch in 2 years, that fight might look very, very different, right? I agree that Steve Erceg should be moving up the division, but I don't care about rankings. Like, I really don't care about rankings. I think, both you and Spencer and Shawnee previously have hit the nail on the head. You've all sort of said the same thing in a different way, and that's, we want to see the best fight the best when they are the best. And at the time, Steve Erceg had earned the shot, right? Like, that was the guy. That was the guy to make it. Because you go and you look at it, is Mahayev versus Pantoja that close? I'm not sure it is. I think in the grappling exchanges, it's very competitive, very, very competitive. But we've seen Mo get hit a lot, and Pantoja does a lot of hitting, right? And so I think Steve Erceg was the right choice, and hindsight is always 2020, and it's always nice to be the general after the battle. But I couldn't be more impressed with Steve Erceg. I thought he looked absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, so did I, and I'm glad he got the opportunity. I'm sure I agree with you too. Like, sometimes I kind of can't try to cool the jets a little bit because I get too excited. But I'm very glad to hear you say that you feel Erceg will be a champion there someday. Because to be honest, it was the strongest thought that I had after watching that fight, or even during that fight. It was like, yeah, we know now that this guy is at an elite level, and he's got so much growing to do. I don't believe he's reached his true ceiling yet, and I'd be very confident of seeing gold around his waist in the future as well, in the 125-pound division. For the next opponents for Pantoja and Erceg, have anyone in mind?
Yeah, I think Erceg is Amir Albazi.
Yes.
Amir Albazi, because Amir Albazi can do some of the boxing, he can do some of the grappling. Obviously, he's had injuries, he's had to pull out of fights and all that stuff. As long as he's healthy, of course, that's what we're looking for. But for Pantoja, I think you do Makayev now. Like, I don't think that there is necessarily another person that is immediately in there that I need to see. I would be happy if he wanted to do Makayev versus Kai Kara France, which is what Makayev has been calling for a little while before you do Pantoja. But yeah, I'm happy to see Makayev in there, because for the same reason with Erceg, let's find out. Let's find out the level. Let's find out. If he goes in and he loses to Pantoja and he looks great in doing so, that's no problem. That's absolutely no problem. If he goes in and gets absolutely destroyed by Pantoja in a round, that's no problem either. He is, 22 or whatever it is? He's so young in his career, so young in his person, that there is so much time for him to rebound from a loss like that. But I wouldn't mind seeing that at all.
Do you think, with Mahayev and his situation now, I think he personally needs one more before maybe getting a title shot. I feel maybe a little bit of a layoff for Pantoja. He's been super active there the last little while, and I think it's kind of showing in his performances as well, because look at Royval got close, Erceg got close, and like you said, it's minimal margins here could see him getting caught up as the champion sooner rather than later. So maybe you're talking, if you take maybe 6 months off, get into another camp again, maybe take the year off and look to try and defend that title early next year and let the division sort itself out. I feel that might be the best route for Pantoja. He might not want to do that, and the UFC might not want to do that, and I completely understand that too, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it depends, right? Because the question for me with Pantoja is this, to me, this is a product of his fighting style. This is a product of his fighting style. He's a fucking mad bastard and always has been. From the Ultimate Fighter days to now, he is a mad bastard. That does a number on your body. That does a number on your brain. And so whilst I completely hear and completely understand what you're saying, that he needs to stretch that longevity as absolutely much as possible, the counterbalance to that is the longer that he stretches it, the better that these guys around him are getting. And you want to cement your legacy, you want to go get paid, you want to do all of these things when you're at your fullest of powers. Now, the question for somebody like Pantoja is, if you take, what are we now, the 5th month, if we wait until January next year and we have a long, nice layoff, we rest our body for a month, 2 months, we get back in the gym, we sort ourselves out, and we start the build-up process nicely and slowly, what do we lose there, right? Do we lose a short step on our speed? Do we lose a short step? Do you know what I mean? Do the other guys start catching up a little bit higher? I don't know.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult to say. But look at exciting times in the 125-pound division. # Fly Never Die, and # the King of Rio is back. And boy, oh boy, is he back. Unbelievable. I was in my absolute element watching Jose Aldo against Jonathan Martinez. Overall doubts maybe around Jose Aldo by a few before the fight. I was confident that his skill set was still good enough to beat a guy like Jonathan Martinez. Came out the start of the fight, in my opinion, as a boxer, like completely boxing heavy. And I was like, oh, okay, no, I know he's been competing and boxing and stuff, but he came out with a kind of a narrow stance, was in the pocket looking to try and counter Jonathan Martinez, but, didn't come off that successful in the first half of the first round. And he just does what Jose Aldo does, man. His ability to change it up mid-fight is next to none, and that's what makes him an absolute elite level fighter. And he did it against Jonathan Martinez, completely shut him down. Had Jonathan Martinez second guessing everything. He had him biting on all the feints and just completely shut. Like, look at, Jonathan Martinez is a really good fighter and was on a 6-fight win streak. Obviously this was the chance to see, could he break that threshold to move into the top 10, becoming the top 10 fighter. Jose Aldo just proved too good still at 37 years of age. And, I come out and I kind of criticized the way he was boxing a little bit, but when he kind of turned himself from a minimal pure boxer at the very start into a mixed martial artist halfway through round 1 and into rounds 2 and 3, I think that opened up his boxing even more, to be honest. And it looked fantastic. And the speed and quickness of him was absolutely delightful to see. Perfect setting by the UFC. They made another correct decision. Jonathan Martinez out first, Jose Aldo out second. Everything was perfect about that performance. If it's the last time we see him in the octagon, I say the octagon, I'm glad it was a memorable one. I think it's not the last time we do see him, but if it's the last time we do see him in the octagon, I'm really glad he went out the way he did go out. And I'm sure you were just as impressed as myself with the King of Rio.
Absolutely. Like, there was a short little segment on Jose Aldo in the spotlight. I was blown away, to be honest. Absolutely blown away. And not only do I not think it's the last time we see him, I don't think it's the last time we see him in the octagon either, to be honest. I think there's a fight to make there with Sean O'Malley. Maybe that's getting a bit too ahead of ourselves, whatever. But when you go out and look as good as he did rolling back the years quite literally. The speed, as you say, the agility, the fight IQ, the awareness to check the kicks, the awareness to punish the kicks, the aware to make reads, the aware to be available for almost everything that Jonathan Martinez had to offer. And then, I agree that he didn't maybe come out as strongly as he could have, but I think that's just muscle memory, right? For the last 18 months, he's basically just been boxing. Like,
for sure, yeah, for sure. You could really see that, though. And I'm nitpicking at that too, but it was like I seen him coming out with that kind of tight stance and that tight guard, and I was like, he's normally a little bit more looser than this, and I think that might cost him. And it did early. Martinez started lighting him up a little bit with those leg kicks, but slowly but surely he just kind of took those kicks away and settled into the Jose Aldo we all grew up know and love, really, and one that we would have seen just tear through a lot of people in the UFC.
Yeah, I think the thing that was actually the most impressive to me was there seemed to be a slightly new wrinkle to the choice of shots. Like,
Yeah,
he's always been a body ripper. He's always been a heavy, heavy, heavy straight puncher. And he's always obviously had some really lovely hooks and stuff. But just it feels to me as though he's fallen back in love with his hands, fallen back in love with the art of choosing the right shot at the right time, or choosing the right shot for him at the right time. And there was just some really, really interesting options that he chose when he ripped to the body, when he stayed up on top, how he feints up top to go to the body and doesn't just touch the body, but really thunders at the body. Was just unbelievable, like unbelievable. And he had Jonathan Martinez so hurt during that fight a number of times. And I think we have to give credit to Martinez for his durability. And what was interesting is how emotional Martinez was at the end of the fight. I think,
he knew it was a big moment for him, wasn't it, against the legend, and it would a big proven fight for him. So look, at in Jose Aldo's success, we have to also have a spare thought for a guy like Martinez, who, obviously went in there with the height of confidence, relished the opportunity of being in the co-main event slot. It just didn't go his way. I don't think that he fought to his level of capability, if I'm being honest, for one reason or another. I believe I really don't think he did. I've seen him a lot more aggressive and more counter, but that's what Jose Aldo does to you, man. That's what he does to you. You know what I mean?
That's my point. I'm not sure Jonathan Martinez could have fought any better necessarily.
On the night, maybe not on the night, but I think there are better performances in there, and hopefully he'll learn. Like, his corner were calling for more activity, right? So the predicament that Jonathan Martinez was in is that, you could go with more activity, but then you're going to open yourself up for more counters. And I think that's what Jose Aldo did. But like, great fighters kind of figure that out too, if we're being honest, But, he obviously didn't get the job done. He'll be disappointed, but he'll bounce back. And that brings us to what we want to see next for Jonathan. You'd reckon we are going to see him in the UFC again? I'm not too sure. I think there could be some big money offers out there, maybe outside the UFC. Maybe there's something that they can work out with the UFC where he gets a little bit of the slice of the pie with the boxing and also has the ability to compete in the UFC. You're confident he just steps back in? You think there might be a road to the title for Jose?
Yeah, so I think look, if it's going to depend, of course, because if Cousin Umar goes out and trucks Corey Sandhagen, then Cousin Umar gets the fight, right? Like, Cousin Umar gets the fight. Sean O'Malley is already talking about Merab, and has been talking about Merab for a little while, but Jose Aldo is a far, far, far more favorable styles matchup for Sean O'Malley than Merab is going to be. Massive fan favorite, amazing story. And if Sean O'Malley was already, we know what Sean O'Malley is. He's a businessman as much as he is anything else. He will look at a 37-year-old Jose Aldo, absolute legend of the 145-pound division, absolute legend of the UFC, already a Hall of Famer, and an ability to knock that off, forcing Merab to wait a little bit longer. That frustration builds into a fighter and everything else. And that's another payday for Sean O'Malley. Do I think he wins that fight? I think it's a great fight, right? Great fight. But he's not worried about Jose Aldo taking him down over and over again, although Jose Aldo's takedown against Jonathan Martinez looked pretty fucking spicy to me. But like, Do I think the UFC will make it? Maybe. I've seen the UFC do crazier things previously. I've seen the UFC promise fighters one thing and then do something completely different. They know where the money is.
UFC, let's be real, not known for their level of integrity when it comes to matters like this.
100%. But it's all going to depend on what Jose wants, right? If Jose wants a slice of the pie with a box in, it's not going to be with the UFC. He's just not a big enough name. It's not a big enough name for the UFC to go and do it. Obviously, he's a massive name to us, but to them, it's not the same. Can he go over to the PFL and make huge money? Can he go to Saudi and make huge money? Can he? I mean, it's the same thing, right? But can he go and make maybe in the MMA game? I don't think so. I'm not sure that somebody at 37 years old is going to offer Jose Aldo an MMA contract that's much bigger than the one he's got right now. But you best believe that there's big boxing fights for him, probably. Personally, I would like to see him stay in the UFC. I would like to see him stay in MMA. And I really wouldn't mind that Jose Aldo Sean O'Malley fight. For Jonathan Martinez, I think he fights the loser of Cousin Umar and Corey Sandhagen. I don't know that either.
Yeah, that's a fair call. Like, there's lots of fun fights in the UFC left for Jose Aldo. Dominic Cruz is there. I wouldn't mind seeing him going with Peter Yan. Loads. Go get that. Yeah, give him that opportunity
to get it back.
To get it back. Look at Yan, fucking destroyed him that first fight. But yeah, 100%. But I don't think Jose was fully comfortable at that 135 pound weight class. I think he's much more settled into that weight right now and kind of figured himself out at that weight as well, which you do need time to do as well. So look, at exciting times if you're a Jose Aldo fan. I hope it is back in the UFC. We will wait and see. Anthony Smith came out with the almost a forgot kind of performance, if for real. You're shaking your head. I'm not surprised that he got the win here. I didn't think he was going to get the win. I didn't give him much of a chance. I thought Petrino. I'm going to say this about Petrino. What the fuck was he at coming out to the fight? It was like he was going for a walk in the park, laughing and joking and all smiley and stuff. But maybe that was a way that he was hiding his nervousness for this fight, perhaps. But to be honest, I wasn't best impressed with his reaction or his attitude before this fight, nor after getting the loss either, if I'm being real, laughing and joking after the fight. I mean, you lost your undefeated record and you lost a real good chance to kind of propel yourself up the 205 pound division. Am I being a little bit too harsh with that as assessment?
No, I think the thing I'm the most frustrated at is how he reacted to Anthony Smith looking for the arm in. I just wanted to throw my face through my TV when I was watching it. But look, I think for Petrino, the pre-fight antics was probably him underestimating Anthony Smith, and then the post-fight antics is embarrassment. That's what that is.
That's the absolute perfect assessment. Perfect assessment.
Don't get me wrong. In 2024, I was picking Vitor Petrino to beat Anthony Smith, and I don't think that's a crazy pick either. But for Anthony Smith to come out, and even Anthony Smith was shocked, frankly. Anthony Smith was shocked because effectively what happens is Petrino shoots a double leg. It was fine, right? Had on the outside, double leg, no problem. Smith threatens the takedown, threatens the arm in guillotine. What you should do there is if you're going to continue to look for the double leg, which is fine, there's no problem with that. You make sure the legs and the knees come together and you make sure that you circle to the same side, to the opposite side of you're choking. So at the moment, Anthony Smith was choking on his left-hand side. And so Petrino should have moved to his right-hand side, right? Or at least moved Anthony Smith when you're finishing the takedown away from the cage so that you've got time to move to your right-hand side. If he then goes high elbow, you can start to address the high elbow, etc., 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 etc. Instead, the dumb bastard lifts Anthony Smith up into the fucking sky. Not only does he lift his own chin up to the sky by doing so and lets Anthony Smith get underneath it, but also he fucking lets Anthony Smith by lifting him up to the sky like he's his fucking new wife or whatever, and allows Anthony Smith to lock up a close guard, which is exactly the wrong place to be if you're defending a guillotine. And Anthony Smith just says, cheers, mate. No stress. I've finished these 1,000 times in the gym. And immediately locks up an arm in guillotine. And he's just looking at the ref, just waiting. You know what I mean? Like chilling, waiting, no problem. Knew it was finished. Absolutely knew it was finished. Like absolute joke of a reaction from Vitor Petrino. A joke.
A segment of the fight right before the finish was that leg kick from Anthony Smith that appeared to do a little bit of damage to Petrino. You know, that probably took Petrino somewhat out of his game if he was thinking about that. But like those are fairly rookie errors that he made. You know, hindsight. Yeah, I know. But it kind of forced the takedown a little bit. But like you got to be expecting things like that against Anthony Smith as well, if we're being real. But look at 11 fights in, 12 fights now for Petrino. A big lesson for him in my opinion, how you approach a fight like this. I honestly, your assessment was perfect. I thought he was strolling out to the octagon already thinking that he had the fight won. And when I was watching that, I was like, no, I'm not happy about what I'm seeing here. You need to be locked in. You need to be zoned in there. You know what I mean? And I don't think that he was. And I think that ultimately cost him overall. And, you know, embarrassment is probably a feeling that he should. And that's been super, super harsh. But look at that. That's the reality of the situation in my eyes anyway. Moving on. Michel Pereira versus Ior Potieria. Oh man, like I mean, another monstrous performance here from Pereira. Like this guy is like I messaged you before the fight started. It was the close up face off that they had on the stage. How did Pereira get down to 170? I don't know. The absolute size of that man. He is an absolute monster, Harry. And he went out and just showcased the level of ability that he has at middleweight. And, you know, you got to question, you know, why he didn't decide to make that decision a hell of a lot sooner.
Because weight cutting is a thing, right? And I'm not going to go on a massive tirade here, but one day in about 35 years, 50 years, whatever it is, we're going to look back at weight cutting and seriously question what the fuck we were thinking in even beginning to think that this was a thing for our sport. I understand in certain elements of wrestling or whatever, where weight cutting is part of the sport, but you're doing so far less damage to your brain via wrestling. Of course, it's an impact sport, it's a combat sport. I understand all of those things, but it is not the same as getting a shin to your fucking dome at full power from an absolutely supremely elite level athlete. And so thankfully, as you say, our friend Michel Pereira has realized that at 185 pounds, he's still a fucking monster.
Like he looks like a 205er now. Like he looks even bigger than a 205er, to be honest. Like, I mean, that's just in comparison maybe to Petrino, who you know is what seems to be like a more not a small fella, but it seems like a more natural middleweight in comparison to Pereira. It's like Jesus, it's a sight to behold. And look, it went out there, got the job done early. Talk to me about the finish of the guillotine.
So I wish I could talk to you about the backflip, but I don't know how to do one. So
oh no, we're talking about that backflip after this. Let's go in a normal sequence of events. It was the guillotine. Oh no, it wasn't. It was the backflip first, wasn't it? So,
yes, he drops him, backflips over his guard, and then Petrino turns in and gets the guillotine. So as Petrino stands, he is standing, and Pereira starts looking for a front headlock. Petrino lifts his chin up. Pereira looks for a high-risk guillotine. Petrino does a good job at stopping the immediate high risk. And so Pereira goes for like I don't know what Marcelo calls it, but it's been coined the Marcelo team, but it's not really that, right? He'll have a name for it and whatever. But it's a specific grip sequence where you use like your hand is like a swan's neck, and then you're pushing the other side of your hand into the side of the carotid artery. So you're choking both sides. And the thing that closes the circle is Pereira starts to push his own abdomen into Petrino's crown of his head. So he's closing that circle with his own stomach.
And you want to arch your back in that position to increase the strength of the choke as well, where you're almost looking to try and lift them up off the ground,
right,
with the grip and with the choke itself.
Yeah, so, but the problem with if you lift them, it starts to actually take the choke off a little bit because they can climb on your legs. But you
Right.
want to be driving your hips into your partner and breaking the posture of them enough so that if Potieria starts to be lifted, Pereira probably would have just pulled or drove him against the fence. Like, there's one fight where we have seen this. I can't specifically remember what it was, but we saw a standing guillotine and they used the wall to climb up the wall and take some of the pressure off. Do you remember what fight that was?
Oh
It was,
God, I can't remember what it was now.
the
Yeah.
UFC. I think my brain tells it was Bellator, but I could be wrong. But yeah.
So in
Just
that position, if you're Pereira, right? If I can just kind of understand for myself, to be honest, where I'm suggesting that you lift, instead you want to crunch down with your
correct,
shoulders, same way as that what you would finish an arm in guillotine if you're on your back.
100% correct.
Yeah.
100%
Yeah.
correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to make sure the posture is as curved as possible. If you start to lift him, there's a potential that his spine starts to come up with the choke.
Yeah.
Look, he's going to have to climb up you in order for that to happen, but it can take some of the pressure off. And to just sort of demonstrate how tight that choke was, Potieria tapped. Michelle
And then fell asleep.
let go and then fell asleep.
Crazy, insane. I'd never seen anything like it. It was insane. What I did see before from here is that mental backflip that he did do, one that was reviewed by the officials after the fight in terms of did it affect the result. Yeah, I thought, I was like, oh no, like that was my initial thought. I was like, oh no, don't do this to the guy. And then I think the correct decision prevailed. What I looked for when I was reviewing that video was the initial reaction of Potieria, and his initial reaction tells me that it wasn't as impactful enough of a strike to affect the outcome of the fight. He sprung up straight away, and then the sequence to the finish. But I think something has to be said about the level of mad bastardry to do that, because there could be a time, if it was an inch one way or an inch another way, where his knee or his shin could have absolutely cracked Potieria, and then we're having a different conversation here, Harry, really, aren't we?
Yeah, 100%. And like, I don't like the backflip. I don't think it's smart fighting. I think it's flashy and it's show offy, and when it lands like it lands, it's brilliant to watch. But at that level of fighting, you have to meter your risk, and you've already smashed him, you've already hurt him, he's already dropped. I'm not sure it's necessary to backflip over his guard. Now, if you don't, then you don't get the highlight reel that we got to see, and that's a crying shame, of course. But in the same vein, if he hits him in the head, we could be looking at a DQ here. You know what I mean?
That's it. Like, I mean, that's the way I look at it. Is like, you're putting yourself at some extreme risk for the sake of entertainment. But that being said, I still fucking love seeing it. I love seeing that. Like
Who does this?
lunacy, lunacy. I can. Jeez, the man. We were talking about the size of him. His ability to kind of do stuff like that is absolutely insane. His level of athleticism is through the roof, and it brings us to the conversation, Harry. Who next for Pereira? Because you know what, Marvin Vittori, get in my belly. That's exactly the fight I want to see. I know Shawnee and Graham are looking at maybe the potential of Paul Craig, and I for the well-being of Paul Craig's health, I don't want to see that fight. To be honest, I think we're gone past the level now by one or two fights of Pereira going in there and absolutely trucking guys. It's time to propel him up into the top 5 of the division and actually see if this guy can be a legit contender at 185, because from what we're seeing so far, there's a damn good chance of it, in my opinion. Now, we need to see him tested. We need to see him brought out of round 1. We need to see if he has that gas tank, if he can be asked certain questions and if he can answer those certain questions. And I don't think anybody right now does it, to be honest, outside the top 6 or 7 in the middleweight division. That's the only type of fight I want to see Pereira in moving forward. Your thoughts?
What do we gain by doing Paul Craig? You know what I mean?
Nothing.
Like if Caio Borralho can put Paul Craig out on the feet, Michel Pereira absolutely destroys him. Like, absolutely destroys him. Caio Borralho, and we'll get to him, maybe this is how we get to him, is not good on the feet. He is not good. Michel Pereira is far, far, far better on the feet than Caio Borralho is. And yeah, that's a fucking horrendous fight for Paul Craig, bless him. I just think we have to find out with Pereira. That middleweight division, especially in that top 5, has been so stale the last little while. Mostly because, obviously the belt has changed hands and stuff, but we had Bobby Knuckles and Israel Adesanya as being literally the only 2 guys. Then we had Costa possibly coming in and around. Hamzat Chimaev had a slight injection of interest, and now we haven't seen him fight in God knows how long. Thankfully, we've got him fighting again. Kamaru Usman had a one-time deal up at middleweight. That was wonderful for what it was, but don't know what he's going to be doing now. Then we had Sean Strickland, for some reason, managed to win a title. Dricus du Plessis comes in, not sure he's going to be winning a title forever. And now, there's this just... We need to see some contenders. We need to see some people emerge as the next Brett at 185 pounds. And fuck me, Michel Pereira could have a really, really interesting run up there. And I think Marvin Vettori is the perfect guy. It's the game plan, technical, stalwart, gonna be in your face, Marvin Vettori. And then it's the level of mastery that we possibly have with Michel Pereira.
Indeed, I couldn't agree anymore. You mentioned Borralho against Paul Craig. I mean, this fight, the only way I can kind of describe how the finish of this fight is that as soon as Borralho tried to actually, put a level of foundation behind these punches, he actually got Paul Craig out there. He was reaching, he was jumping, he didn't have his feet under him. The punches were landing, but they weren't landing as impactfully. But he did decide to plant his feet in round 2, I believe, or it was the end of round 1, was it? No, it was round 2, excuse me. Where he did actually land heavy on Paul Craig, and the writing was on the wall there. And I think the route to victory was pretty plain and simple. Obviously, you're not going to be playing around with a guy like Paul Craig in the grappling department. I think he showed a good level of IQ, and I think it's a no-brainer when you're fighting Paul Craig not to follow him down to the canvas when he hits there, whether you hurt him, whether you don't. But I mean, look at it. I'm not saying he's a good high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but I look at percentages, right? And the percentages of you getting finished against Paul Craig on the mat in comparison to getting finished on the feet, it's like chalk and cheese, in my opinion. I think Borralho made that right decision, but, not a performance that really gets you too excited, if we're being honest, Harry.
May I throw out a slightly different opinion?
Go ahead.
I don't know how much I'm tied to this opinion, but it just arose after what we've just said. There are questions, mostly from me, actually, about the legitimacy of Borralho, right? I feel like he is a manufactured UFC product. I feel like he's been built in a way that allows him to flourish in the way that he has done, both from a commercial perspective and also from a fighting perspective. If I am Borralho, I'm saying Paul Craig is this fella that's supposed to be really scary on the mat. I'm going to contend with him there. Yeah. If you go and you hurt him, right, follow him down. Follow him down and just see what happens, right? Obviously not see what happens, of course, but this is supposed to be a showcase fight again for you in the hometown, not hometown, but in your home country, right? On the main card, in exactly the right position for you on a main card, right? Against a guy who you're better than on the feet, you're quicker than, and you're supposed to be a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, right? Why can't we see a little of I'm going to go out? What's one of the things we love about John Jones? He was like, oh, you're a wrestler?
I'm glad you mentioned it. I was holding off to say that because that's what makes John Jones so great, in my opinion, is that he went in there and beat people at their own game. And you know what? That's the opinion you have about for Borralho there. I can't argue too much against it. I understand why you didn't choose to do that, but that's the difference between good fighters, great fighters, and elite fighters, really, isn't it?
I think so. And look, if I'm in Borralho's corner and he follows Paul Craig down, I am jumping in the cage and dragging him off in myself. And that's a fucking... I'd be screaming at him to get back to his feet. But from a athlete's perspective, from a fighter's perspective, really you need to win. It's really from a fan's perspective that if we want to see him go out, let's say he submitted Paul Craig, knocked him down, took his back, choked him. I think that looks very different to him hopping around like a rabbit, trying to punch Paul Craig that just about gets it done when he realizes if he puts his feet on the ground, he can hit a little bit harder. It just wasn't a good performance at all for me. It really, really wasn't.
Indeed. Who next?
So I think for Kyle Borralho, you absolutely have to do somebody real now. You know what I mean? And the answer is Jack Hermansson. And I think Jack Hermansson beats the brakes off him, to be honest. I don't think that Kyle Borralho is going to be able to take him down as easily. Jack Hermansson's a good wrestler. I think Jack Hermansson is a good enough fundamental fighter on the feet that he will hurt Kyle Borralho and he'll get to him. And it might be that they're going to find Jack Hermansson, coming to the tail end of career, let's be honest, at the right time for Kyle Borralho. But I think Jack Hermansson has got enough to get it done.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that too much, but yeah, it's definitely a jump up in competition. And that's what Borralho has worked his way into. Moving on, the Anderson Brito Jack Shore was your prelims headliner. We'll talk about how the fight was stopped maybe after your assessment of how the fight was going before the stoppage. I thought the fight was going to go the way it went early, with Brito being Brito being kind of aggressive early on, and Jack Shore kind of having to weather the early storm. That's the way the fight was kind of materializing. I think, the true tale of this fight was starting to be told in round 2. What was Jack Shore coming into it? It's kind of hard to know, but he was never out of the fight, that's for sure. What was your assessment of the fight before the stoppage?
Look, you and I said personally, and I'm happy to share it now, that our main fear coming in here was how Jack Shore was going to deal with the athleticism of Brito. One of the things that Jack Shore has not been in his career is an explosive athlete. He's much more of a concentric athlete, whereby if he, like Damian Maia, he's not going to dive into anything. He's not going to explode into flying knees and this and that and the next thing. But if he gets a hold of you, he's a nightmare to deal with. And Brito is obviously the opposite of that. He is Francisco Trinaldo at 145 pounds, where he's just built like a fucking fire hydrant. And that is a huge, huge problem, or I expected it to be a huge, huge problem against Jack Shore. And I think Richard Shaw summed it up really, really well on Twitter afterwards, which was he agrees that the team were chasing the fight, right? They certainly weren't in control of the fight. They were chasing the fight, but Jack looked good. He was dealing with the athleticism very, very, very well. And I was very, very impressed with the way he was dealing with that athleticism. The takedown defense against the cage was great. The reversals were great. I thought the offense looked good as well. He had Brito guessing on things. And like we said, was he winning the fight? No, I don't think that was fair to say, but he was certainly finding his feet. I think in the same vein, he was probably concerned as to how the athleticism was going to feel, how that strength, how that size was going to feel in there. And he took that 5 minutes to get used to it. And we were unfortunately robbed of those extra 7.5 minutes or whatever it was going to be. But I think Jack Shore can take positives away from that. I certainly have taken positives away from that in terms of my framing of Jack Shore going forward. Anderson Brito was a very, very, very difficult test outside of those 145-pound rankings. And Jack Shore certainly didn't look like he was completely outmatched.
No, look, Brito did very, very well to kind of bring a leg kick heavy game in, where a lot of people might have thought he would have went head hunting a little bit. I thought that was good. But like I said, the point that I thought the fight was really going to take shape was that midway point through the second round and into round 3, where I felt we had seen Brito kind of slow down a little bit and would continue to slow down, in my opinion, because, you just can't fight at that ferocity and that pace that he did. Like, my biggest qualm about the finish is, we've seen guys in there with their fucking ears hanging off and with their eyes almost hanging out of their head. And, we let these guys continue. And for a cut like that, all I ask is anybody is to rub their hands down by their shin bone and feel how sharp it is. So if you take impact on that, it is going to open up. But it was by no way or means shaping or affecting Jack Shore in that fight. He looked to be moving around. Yes, it looked nasty as hell. It was a nasty injury. Yes, there was potential that it could open even more, but let it open more. Like, you don't stop it at that instant. Like, what was the doctor doing? He stuck his thumb inside the cut. Like, I'm not a doctor, but I know I've never seen that before. It's very rare that you see a laceration on a shin like that. I've seen a good few in Muay Thai fights, to be honest, and I've never seen an assessment like that. Yes, you've got to check for a fracture. Yes, you got to ensure that Jack Shore is safe, but he's walking. He's not showing any reaction to it whatsoever. It was just a cosmetic cut on the leg, and there's no way that fight should have been stopped. And I think it's a crying shame for Jack Shore having, a big opportunity there, relishing the opportunity to go out and beat Brito on home soil. Yes, the fight wasn't going his way, but you described it absolutely perfectly. We were robbed of how that fight was going to materialize. And I think the only option here is to do the rematch, to be honest. Your quick thoughts before we move on?
I've got no problem with the rematch whatsoever. I hope, all I will say is, if the UFC aren't going to do the rematch, I hope they look favorably on Jack Shore there, because that was a decision that was completely taken out of context from him completely. Like, Jack Shore was like, I'm grand. There's just a bit of blood on my leg. Like, I'm grand, lads. I'm grand. Like, the elbow that cut open Pantoja, that was probably a worse cut potentially.
Yeah, and in a much worse area as well. Like,
streaming down into his face, right? Like, the cut underneath his eye was streaming into his face. Now, you're not going to stop a title fight for a cut like that, right? But it was bizarre to me. I understand that maybe.
Would you put more at fault there? Would you think, is it a doctor? Is it a ref? Is it look at a mixture of both decisions there? Because, we have seen some referees kind of take the bull by the horns and kind of make that decision, or the doctor is always looking about safety, and but sometimes the referee's got to get into a doctor's ear and kind of maybe be the voice of reason in that certain situation. And I feel some referees would have there, but it's hard to say, and it's a harsh assessment. But I just think ultimately the wrong decision was made there.
I mean, I think it's obvious the wrong decision was made. In terms of the chain of command, I'm not sure if the referee's obviously bringing the doctor in for his advice. If the doctor comes in and says, I think you should stop the fight, I don't think he's safe to continue, and the ref says, I think he's grand, I don't know what that means. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, because then what's the fucking point in bringing the doctor in? Other than to say,
well, maybe you can question the doctor. What's wrong with the leg? Is it,
right?
Maybe you can just create a level of conversation where the doctor might change his mind. Like, you don't go and you stick your full fucking thumb into the cut and then call the fucking fight off. It's like, it's insane. And I couldn't believe it. Like, I couldn't believe what I was seeing, to be honest.
It's possible that we've become desensitized to these things, and we look at a cut on the leg and we're like, sure, look, it's a cut on the leg. But
how do you assess a cut? And, like, sorry for interrupting you. I don't know why I feel so passionate about this, but if we assess a cut on someone's face, we can assess it and we can allow it to go on. We can say, okay, we're allowing this fight to go on, but if the cut gets any worse, then we've got to stop the fight. And I think, that was probably the route that should have been traveled really on Saturday night.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the cut assessment, especially on the face, right, is if you're assessing a cut on the face, you're assessing it for a couple of reasons. The first one is the blood going to go into a fighter's eye and stop him from being able to see? Because if it is, then that is a problem and you have to stop the fight. I understand that completely. That's fine, right? No problem. If the other one is if the cut gets so big that you are then causing potential, like, actual physical structural damage, long-term damage and infection and all of these things, then of course that's a problem as well, right? And that's what we're assessing for. But we're talking about a leg.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like, and all those things that you said makes, I think, the leg, the cut on the leg, the ultimate overall decision a little bit easier to make. Yeah.
It's crazy. Like, what are we assessing here for? Is he going to slip on his own blood? Probably not. Like, probably not. Is he going to, because he's constantly stepping out of the line of the blood potentially? Is he like, I don't know.
I think Graham kind of packaged it perfectly on the big podcast where he said, have him walk up and down and see if he's walking okay, or have him jump up and down on the leg to see if he can put weight on and make him fucking stand on one leg if that's going to make the fight continue. But yeah, look, I don't know. I gotta stop before I say something that really get myself in trouble here. But I just don't agree with that at all, and I think it's a shame for Jack Shore. And hopefully they kind of give him the opportunity to get the opportunity to kind of fight 3 rounds against Brito. I'd like to see that and how it would progress.
On the Manchester card.
Yes, yeah, putting on the Manchester card, he's going to be right. Get a few stitches in there, he'll be back. Obviously the calf is going to be sore. The leg kicks were very impactful, that has to be said. But yeah, nonetheless, disappointing for Jack Shore. Hopefully, we get to see him on that Manchester card, and yeah, hopefully it's against you, Anderson Brito. Moving on down, I'm going to shout out a couple of fights here before we'll stop at your guy in the Severe Spotlight. Ishman Lucindo, she was very, very impressive against Karolina Kowalkiewicz. Just very, very good shot selection, very good range in her combinations, just kept Kowalkiewicz guessing on all fronts, and massively impressive performance, really, wasn't it, Harry?
It was a smart performance against a wily veteran in Karolina Kowalkiewicz. And I don't think this necessarily stalls Kowalkiewicz's return or the momentum that she was building. I just think that Lucindo, it's probably it's one of those fights where Lucindo has grown up watching Kowalkiewicz in the UFC and has watched those fights, watched those reactions, watched that person for so long that when you get in there and fight her, you've probably fought her a number of times already. I know that it's not the Dominic Cruz, Cody Garbrandt-esque level of competition, but Karolina Kowalkiewicz was a big part of that division for a long time. And so, yeah, I was very impressed with Lucindo. Very, very impressed.
Yeah, indeed. You look at her record and you think, oh yeah, she's been around for a while, and she has been around for a while, but only 22 years of age and massive potential to reach her ceiling. Going off early performances, it's hard not to see someone like Lucindo putting a real title challenge in there eventually, and being a real legit contender at 115. And I'm excited to see her progress. Moving on down to 155, Orolbai versus Elvis Brener. I thought Orolbai started this fight so good, and I was really impressed with it, but just slowly turned into a little bit of a farce, really, to be honest, where he was putting himself into positions that made this fight a hell of a lot closer than what it should have been, Harry, really, in reality.
Yeah, it was a fun fight in that many positions were exchanged, but I just think he got gassed, to be honest. Like, I think the first round he looked good. Brener is a dog. We know that Brener is a dog. We know that he's in there from moment one to when the bell rings at the final seconds of the fight. And yeah, I just we shouldn't probably get too high on Orolbai. Can cardio improve? Yeah, it can. But I don't know. These are the fights he's going to be in. I think that's what we're looking at. These are the fights.
Yeah. Like, I was looking at him and I was like, oh, geez, this guy has got a bit about him. But, as the fight progressed, that level of confidence in his abilities kind of did dwindle a little bit. And yeah, I'm sure there'll be bigger tests along the way for him. Stopping off at Drakkar Klose versus Joaquim Silva. Joaquim Silva is a tank, isn't he? This was a really close fight, but I completely agree with the decision here to give this fight to Klose. And what was a hashtag close fight? Your thoughts on the performance? Is just a typical Drakkar Klose performance, really. He tired a little bit towards the end of the fight, but had done enough, I believe, in rounds 1 and rounds 2 to get the win.
He's just a really tough fighter to fight against. Like, he's at that level anyway, right? He knows what he's doing. He can grapple a bit. He can strike a bit. He's tough. Okay, he's not got a huge gas tank that can keep him working at that clip for the full 15 minutes, but he's a tough out for somebody like a Joaquim Silva. And like, look, I'm not asking him to come up against the next 22, 23, 25-year-old hungry gun, but in and around that placement in the division, he's a tough out. Fair play to him.
100%. You mentioned previously, look, you gave one of your flowers to Jose Aldo in the Severe Spotlight this week, but the rest of those flowers went to Mauricio Ruffy, who came in for his UFC debut against a tough Jamie Mullarkey. And my goodness, what he did to Jamie Mullarkey is not easy to do. And how impressed are you? Obviously, look, I know how you're impressed. He was the target of the Severe Spotlight. Head over to SevereMMA.com and check that out right now. You hit on a bunch of points. Elegant as always in explaining how good he was. What are some of the points you'd like to hit on here, Harry, about Ruffy's performance against Mullarkey?
Look, obviously, I've never spoke to Ruffy before. I don't know specifically his person, but a UFC card coming to Brazil in Rio with Jose Aldo on it and a title fight, that's big feelings, right? That's big feelings. That's big motivation. That's big emotions. That's big pressure. You're going out one of 13 Brazilians, obviously 12 on the night, but 13 Brazilians that are looking to bring the fighting pride of a very, very, very fighting nation home once more. And to make your UFC debut against somebody like Jamie Mullarkey is not an easy thing to be given. That's not an easy assignment to be given. And he went out and he was confident from moment one. We saw that weird leaning low kick right out of the gate. We saw the fucking Kanabasami entry. I've never seen that in MMA outside of fucking pride eras.
It was like Rio Shonen's-esque against Anderson Silva. Ridiculous.
Right. And he hits hard. There's some holes in there, and I wrote about those holes, but there's confidence. There is impactful striking. There's a bit of grappling. And my God, his ability to make the reads on Jamie Mullarkey was really impressive. And he cycled through reads. So he would show Jamie Mullarkey the jab, and then as Jamie Mullarkey would dip, he'd look for an uppercut. The uppercut wasn't there. And there was a moment in that first round, near the end of that first round, where Jamie Mullarkey really dipped and he thought about throwing the knee, but Mullarkey backed out. And you could tell there, he was like, oh, I've got it. I know it's coming. I'm gonna throw the flying knee. And the way he set up the switch knee, he didn't throw it on his back leg as you would generally have it. He switched to his front knee, which I thought was very, very impressive. And the actual TKO. One thing that I was impressed with too, just as a side, I didn't write about this specifically, but he landed the shots on Mullarkey and he's looking at the ref like, big man, how many more fucking shots do I need to land on this fella? He is clearly finished. Like, fucking do something. And thankfully, the referee listened and took mercy on Jamie Mullarkey. But
are you picking up the comparisons to McGregor? In certain terms?
I mean, at this point, McGregor has influenced so many people's style.
Yeah.
I think that it's unfair to draw, like, I don't think Ruffy is necessarily mimicking the McGregor style, but I think that there are
similarities there for sure. And
similarities.
You know what? I agree with what you're saying as well. But I do want to kind of compliment in similarities for a UFC debut is how relaxed and how enjoying the moment that Ruffy was. And when you are relaxed and when you are enjoying the moment, it brings out performances like that. His shot selection was excellent. And, you know, being an aggressive fighter that forced Mullarkey to move forward in frustration of his, in some parts, kind of led him towards the finish as well, where he forced Mullarkey to move forward and kind of force his shots and countered them so well. Like, I mean, brilliant performance, and cannot wait to see that man again. I think we're going to have some fun times with Marcelo Ruffy in the UFC, 155-pound division. Get in my belly. Ishmael Bonfim versus Vince Pichel. Bonfim has the case of the Justin Gaethje's about him, I think, a little bit. He throws a little bit too much into his shots, and I think that's why UFC matched him with a guy like Vince Pichel, because he's as tough as they come. And I think the UFC wanted to ask the question of Bonfim as, what are you going to do when your big shots don't land? Now, we've seen, obviously, Ishmael lose before, but you know, he was throwing absolute hammers, but Pichel was just eating it all up. But at the end of the day, a pretty one-sided decision overall. And I think he would be generally happy with the whole performance as a whole, although he was chasing that knockout.
Yeah, I'm not as high on Bonfim as I was when he first joined the UFC. I thought it was he saw an opportunity for a KO and he took it, whereas now he's just chasing KOs. And look, Vince Pichel is tough. He's wily. He's durable. I thought it was good. I am impressed that Bonfim was able to land takedowns on Vince Pichel, because Vince Pichel could do a bit of the wrestling. But yeah, I think that Bonfim is going to be similar to somebody like a Terrence McKinney, who fans are going to enjoy watching and they're going to have a good time watching him, but he's not going to be what you think he is. He is too focused on entertainment versus education, and Ishmael Bonfim is entertainment.
There you go. We've seen it before. We'll see it again. Last 2 fights on the card. I'll just mention this one first. Dayon Barbosa picked up a unanimous decision win over Ernesta Karashate in a 125-pound division. Well done to her. Opening fight of the card, Alexander Costa defeated Kevin Borjas. Punches from the back mount there. I have to hold my hand up and say I didn't see either one of those fights. Didn't have time to take those in. Any thoughts on Costa and Borjas?
Yeah, Costa just fights like John Lineker, basically. He is basically in FIFA, you'll know, and most of the listeners will know, that used to get what's called regens. So when an old player retires, the game will regenerate that player into another young, computer generated whatever. And Alessandro Costa is a regen of John Lineker for sure. Little, stocky, mad haircut, and just throws fucking hammers. Nothing else but hammers. Not a lot happened in the first round, but when Alessandro Costa landed, he landed really, really well. And then he clipped Borjas, took his back, smashed him. Yeah, good performance.
Good performance, good card overall. That's a wrap on the UFC 301 review on the balance breakdown this week. Head on over SevereMMA.com. Check out the Severe Spotlight, which did shine on Mauricio Ruffy. Great write-up. As always, every Monday, SevereMMA.com. At BJJ_Harry Powell. At BJJ Harry Powell, no underscore. At BJJ Harry Powell.
BJJ underscore.
In underscore. I was right the first time. I corrected myself. I needed to have that Harry Powell level of confidence to go in there and take legs at the Essex Open under 76 kg category. You can see that man on the mats in London. You can see him on Twitter at BJJ_Harry Powell at O'Neill MMA. That's the balance breakdown. We'll see you later on in the week for the Severe setup. Good luck.